feel good. Give them a round of applause. That was just emotional. I'm sorry. I got to give myself a moment. I'm a little verklempt, I must admit. So, this series of talks that I'm giving is the second, and it's on Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. The reason I'm giving this series of talks is because Louise has such simple yet really clear ways of helping a person finally move into what we would call in this philosophy a consciousness of acceptance of love. And love is so key, it's so important in people's lives. And oftentimes there might be a word that's overused, but it's not necessarily a principle that's applied a lot of times, consciously. And a lot of people are waiting for love to experience in their life. And what I want to talk to you today is about how we create the consciousness for that love to happen, not only to happen, but to heal us and to help heal others too. So I'm going to have Reverend Liz Waller read to you from the front of your program something that Louise wrote about the amazing power of love.
I continue to explain that no matter what their problem seems to be, there's only one thing I ever work on with anyone, and this is loving the self. Love is the miracle cure. Loving ourselves works miracles in our lives. I am not talking about vanity or arrogance or being stuck up, for that is not love. It is only fear. I am talking about having a great respect for our mind. Love to me is appreciation to such a degree that it fills my heart to bursting and overflows. Love can go in any direction. I can feel love for the very process of life itself, the joy of being alive, the beauty I see, another person, knowledge, the process of the mind, our bodies and the way they work, animals, birds, fish, vegetation in all its forms, the universe and the way it works. What can you add to this list? Let's look at some of the ways we don't love ourselves. We scold and criticize ourselves endlessly. We mistreat our bodies with food, alcohol, and drugs. We choose to believe we are unlovable. We are afraid to charge a decent price for our services. We create illnesses and pain in our bodies. We procrastinate on things that would benefit us. We live in chaos and disorder. We create debts and burdens. We attract lovers and mates who belittle us. What are some of your ways?
That's the thing I like about Louise, is that she kind of puts it right to you, right up front. Is that there's this whole repertoire of things that people do in the process of many times an attempt at loving oneself. But she also mentions in the book, what if you were taking a little 4-year-old child and put him up here on the platform, and I instructed you all to look at this child, not say a word, and look at this child with disapproval. What would you suppose that would do to that child if all those eyes were looking at them with disapproval? But in some respects, that happens to every one of us, because many of us have had experiences where we've had that look of disapproval. We didn't even know we were being disapproved, but we could tell that we were feeling disapproved of. And it's that constant message given over and over again which builds up a false understanding of who you really are. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of work sometimes in people's hearts to overcome that message. Now, a lot of people are sort of hypnotized. I remember we had a person in our congregation a number of years ago who was a certified hypnotist, and he put on a demonstration. He hypnotized a bunch of people. I'm sure many of you have been to hypnotic shows. And the person convinced this one person that the number 4 was no longer in existence. The number 4 had been removed from the world. And so then he woke them up and they said, count your fingers. And this is what the person did. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then he looked at his hands and he knew something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He says, count them again. 1, 2, 3, 5. And he left 4 out because he was told 4 no longer exists. And I just sat there in amazement, because I've seen hypnotists do such things. But it's also proof that we're so amazingly suggestible that if I told you that you weren't worth loving, you might actually believe me. And that would be such a tragedy of unspeakable proportions. And yet, many of our children grow up feeling unloved, not because you don't love them, but because you didn't overtly tell them in a sincere and loving way that you love them, and you didn't give them the message that they were always enough, and that their lives were always expressing a higher degree of goodness and joy and greatness. Now, the reason a lot of people can't give that message, because they didn't get it either. If I didn't get the message, how am I going to pass it along to you? How am I going to help you get to the place of love? So one of the things that we do in this center, one of the things we support, is our ongoing teen camp program, where we send teens to summer camps. And for 5 years in the 90s, I was part of those camps. I was a counselor there. And we used to do workshops with the kids. And the workshops always involved some way of getting to that "am I good enough" message. And so one workshop was, we actually had the kids write on t-shirts the things that they thought, the negative things they thought about themselves. I'm too ugly, I'm too fat, I'm too tall, I'm too stupid, I'm too this, I'm too that, whatever. And they would make a list, and they would write it on the t-shirt in these black pens. Then we would have them put the t-shirts on one at a time. And we would instruct the group to actually mirror what they had written by saying back to them, well, you're just too ugly. I guess you're just not smart enough. I guess maybe you're just not tall enough. I guess maybe you're just not, mature. And so they just kept feeding back all the things that they had written negatively about themselves. And then they got the message. And what was the message? He said, if you think negatively of yourself, you will draw that to you. If you think negatively of yourself, you will draw that to you. Now, you would think that would be an obvious thing. It's not obvious. It's not obvious in people's minds that one negative thought you have about yourself, that one unloving experience that you have about yourself, could draw to you a reaction. Because the world is a mirror. And whatever you put up there, that's exactly what you get back. And one of the things that Louise does in her book is she actually has people use mirrors to hold the mirror up and look in the mirror and say, I love you for exactly who you are. And say that over and over again. Now, sometimes, I know when I first heard this, I thought, well, what good could that possibly do? Try it. See what happens. See what happens when you look in the mirror. Now, I make it a point, and Patty will confirm this, that when I get up in the morning, I go to the mirror, and here's what I do. How you doing today, handsome? Gee, you're looking good. I love you. And of course, whatever I say, I get back. Now, why would I take the trouble to do something that seems so, maybe, insignificant in the things you would do during your day? Because I know, it's taken me time to finally say that to myself, about myself. Now, I invited some people to share with you this morning. And I want to ask one of them to share. Now, I'm going to ask Jenny to share in just a moment. But first I'm going to ask Ula to share. And so Ula, come on up, Ula. Ula had a daughter who went to these camps. And, sometimes you wonder why we exist as a center. And you might wonder why we ask you to support us. I'm going to let Ula tell you why it's so important. You got it.
I have a 19-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And I went through a very difficult divorce 12 years ago. And my children's father is Catholic and very negative and closed-minded and not at all loving. And my daughter was going through a very difficult time through the divorce. And she started going to the camps when she was 13, and she went both to the winter camp and to the summer camp for 5 years. And she confided in me that because of those camps, she learned how to accept her father and know that he was always coming from a place of love and not to take anything that he said personally. She has a very strong sense of self and a sense of self-confidence, and her relationship with her father is really, really good now. And I know that if it hadn't been for the camps, that wouldn't be the case today. And I'm so grateful both for the philosophy and for her ability to go to these camps that I can't even express how grateful I am.
And when kids come back from camp, what did you notice about her behavior when she came back from camp?
She was happy and loving and thoughtful and peaceful and just happy.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for sharing. We appreciate that. You know, sometimes I don't get a chance to share with you some of those stories because it's important for you to hear them. It's important because lives do change on a daily basis. Every time somebody decides they're going to be loving today, lives change. And lives change because it's an unchangeable truth. Love is unchangeable. But the choice of whether or not you choose to be loving, that can change. And we also have adults who, this is sort of like adult camp every Sunday, if you will. And when adults come to camp and they participate, just like you do, and they hear words, sometimes it escapes me, but they come back to me and they'll tell me about things that changed their lives. One little thing changed their lives. I remember when I first started in this teaching, and I was going to church just like you, hearing the minister speak, and I'd come back, and I was teaching school at the time, and I'd come back and share with my colleagues something I heard at church, and then a couple of months later, I had a colleague come up to me and say, you know, do you remember what you said to me a couple of months ago? And of course I'd say, no. What did I say to you? And they would tell me. And they said, that made a huge difference in my life. Just a couple of 3 or 4 words. So now we have, I'm going to ask Jenny to come up here. Jenny, if you can come up. Jenny is Miss Orange County Senior Citizen. I'm going to let you tell them how this teaching has changed your life.
Well, I absolutely have completely changed myself in the center. I started about 2005, and I was raised to be a fixer. Come to me with your problems and I'll fix them. Well, the problem with being that kind of a person is that all you get from people are their problems. And so what I started to do here was to change myself. And I used to describe love as something like Greek. I'd never heard it spoken. I wasn't quite sure what it was supposed to be sounding like. And I had to learn all over how to be loving to other people and also to myself. I find that when I come here on Sunday and I listen to Jim's wonderful talks, it's almost always about something I needed to hear. And this place gives me a place to express the love in my heart for other people. It gives me a chance to get outside of myself and do things like act in a play and teach a bunch of teenagers how to do a Tahitian dance, things that I would have never done in the past. And so I am so grateful to you guys for being my extended family and my home away from home. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Marilyn, I didn't forget you, but I'm just on the upbeat moment here. You know, the thing about what you just heard, of course, is that when people come into this teaching, most people who are feeling a lack of love, a sense of, and lack of love, by the way, is not necessarily feeling lonely. It can be worry, agitation, and fear, things like that. Those are all symptoms of lack of love. Now, the society that we live in teaches us, unfortunately, that worry is an okay experience. That in fact, if you're not worried, something might be wrong. So therefore we worry to keep things from going bad. It's kind of like worrying to keep our milk from going bad. Eventually the milk is going to sour. It doesn't make any difference whether you worry or not. I remember somebody asked Socrates, should I get married or should I not get married? And Socrates said, it doesn't matter, you will repent. So, Socratic joke. The point is it's a challenge. It is a challenge from my perception as a minister to get people from living in need to living in cause. Not need, but cause. To move you over into the cause column requires that you have to give up what you think you need. And everybody on the planet, most everybody, has defined not by what they're living for, but what they're in need of. So I'm in need of love, or I'm in need of money, or I'm in need of self-confidence, or I'm in need of health. I'm in need of something. And of course, the more you live in need, then the more the need creates itself over and over again. So you're never satisfied. You're never feeling a sense of accomplishment and oneness with life. Instead, you're feeling very much separate from yourself. And in that sense of separation, even more fear begins to grow. And isn't it true that no matter how good your day is going, if one person comes along and says one really good negative zinger, that it's possible that you could in fact completely fall flat on your face and become depressed, become afraid, wonder if whether or not you're doing the right thing. I remember when I was first ministered 28 years ago, and I had taught for 15 years. I taught school, and I was pretty good at teaching, and I had a safe, secure job. I had health benefits. What would possess me to want to do this work? I mean, there was no health insurance. There was no guarantee of anything. Why would I want to do this? It's because I knew that I had to do something to learn how to keep expressing love. I could express love teaching music, that's true. But if I could teach this philosophy to people and I could help change lives, I would really feel good about myself. And so when I became a minister, after I graduated from ministerial training, in my first church, what they call candidated for, and I spoke, and they actually hired me. I couldn't believe they would hire me. I was brand new at this. I'd never done this before. But they liked me for 3 weeks. And this was in Florida. So I'm living in California. I go to Florida, and my family's still in California, and I'm there by myself. And I'm enjoying all this adulation where you're the best, we're so happy you're here, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, it just kind of fell apart. And I remember one of the board members who was doing some unstructured classes and things that had nothing to do with our philosophy. I had to ask him to stop doing those classes. And he got very angry with me. And he got a bunch of other people angry with me. And pretty soon, if you have enough anger, people angry at you, and they plant enough seeds of doubt, you know how that feels. It feels horrible. And about 3 to 6 weeks into my first expression as a minister, I said to myself, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Have you ever done that? Maybe when you first got married? What the hell have I gotten myself into? And so I remember saying that to myself, thinking to myself, I can't believe I went into this profession because I wanted to experience love. And I wasn't experiencing love. And then it became quite clear it's because I wasn't loving myself in the process. Because if you really, really learn how to love yourself, you develop an ability not to become immune to criticism, but to translate the criticism and what it's really about. Because here's a little secret about all criticism. And I'm not talking about helpful suggestions that can help improve what you're doing. That's different. I'm talking about criticism that starts out, if only you were smart enough. If only you were this, if only then you would blah, blah, blah. That's not helpful suggestions. That's a smackdown. Has anybody experienced a smackdown this week? Yeah. It really feels horrible, doesn't it? I mean, you feel like dirt. And then I didn't realize, and I called my sponsor, Roy Graves, and I said, I don't understand this. And he said, here's the key. And this is very important. Anybody's anger or criticism of you has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. But you're a convenient target. You're a target. And if you can understand that's not about you, then don't take it personal. And just having said that, I could breathe easier. And when you're afraid, and you're worried, and you're agitated, and you're in fear, you notice you breathe very shallowly. And so I learned a technique that I do frequently, and this is a little musical technique because I taught music. And when you're a conductor, you have the upbeat and you have the downbeat. Let's do that together. The upbeat and the downbeat. And what I did was I took the upbeat, turned it into an inhaling breath through my nose like this, and the downbeat was an exhaling sound through my mouth like this. And I dropped my hand right here at my heart line. So let's try it together. Here we go. Now, when you do that, and I've taught that to many people, that instantly does two things. It helps recenter you in the moment, and it helps recreate you in the moment. Because breath, by the way, is the closest thing to God. Because breath is God. And when breath is God, and you learn how to breathe, and I know we have John in the audience who's an expert at breathing, and I so appreciate him. I do. He's a yoga master teacher, he teaches great classes in yoga. But John will tell you that breath is central to the whole way your body lives and responds. And if you don't learn how to breathe, you can't express yourself. Now, when I taught music, we would teach people how to breathe. I taught instrumental music. And of course, in instrumental music, you have to learn how to breathe from your diaphragm down here. And you actually, if you press in a little bit and you breathe out, you have to pop your fingers out like this. And you literally make your diaphragm push out like this. And as you breathe out, you would hold the pressure of the diaphragm so that the air would come out under an even amount of pressure. And that's how a trumpet player can play trumpet, and a French horn player can play French horn, and so on and so on. But what about the cello? Does it breathe? And it does. Because the person playing the cello is breathing. Now, have you ever heard of a guy named Yo-Yo Ma? And if you've ever seen Yo-Yo Ma play, he's totally committed to his music. He's totally committed to his music. And when he plays the cello with such bravado. And you can see him breathing and breathing and just totally orbed in the music. What if you went to work that way? Totally orbed in your life. Totally passionately involved in your existence. I mean, people might think you're strange. Well, you are strange. But here's the deal. You do that mentally with your life. You're going into that relationship with a sense of passion and no expectation. When that cellist gets up there and plays that beautiful sound on that instrument, there's no expectation. There's an expectancy that when I put that bow on the string and I begin to draw it, and I have my fingers solidly on that note, that I will hear something that will just transform me vibrationally my whole life. Vibrating. That is true of you right now. You're all cellos. But you don't know how to play yourself. You sit there in the corner wondering if you're good enough. And of course, have you ever heard a beginning violin student? You ever heard that? You might think it's agony. It's terrifying. Who would put an instrument like that in a little kid's hand? But you know, if you've ever seen little kids play instruments, and especially the Suzuki method, this wonderful Japanese method where they walk around with their violins like this for like 2 days before they even put a bow on the string. And when they put a bow on the string, they play and bow at the same time and walk. Why? Because they want it to be second nature. They're playing the instruments like breathing. It shouldn't be thought of something unusually different. And so when kids start to play with such a sense of passion, the first notes they play are just absolute miracles. But to you, of course, it doesn't sound like a miracle. It sounds like a miracle waiting to happen. So, but they play and they listen and they adjust and they play and they listen and they adjust. And in this philosophy, you pray and you listen and you adjust. You pray and you listen and you adjust. But if you don't know how to pray, you'll never put the bow on the string. You'll never give your life a chance to be lived. Some of you have been sitting there a long time with your lives, and you haven't applied yourself. When I used to teach music, and I've used this example before, there's a technique to teaching 30 kids playing 7 different band instruments how to play from the beginning. There's a technique on how to do this. And one of the techniques is that you have to get the kid to respect the instrument. How hard is it to get an adult to respect themselves? Very hard sometimes. But when you're a little kid, I'll say, now pick up the clarinet and put it on your lap and open it very carefully. And they would open up the case. And they were just like, you could see the excitement in their eyes. When was the last time you had that kind of excitement in your life? When was the last time you brought something to yourself and you could look at it with such passion, saying, you take a breath in and find it. When was the last time that happened? You see, your life is like an instrument waiting to be played. You haven't opened up the case. You haven't opened up the inside of you to find out how magnificent you are. And if you knew that you were that beautiful, and when the kids would look at the clarinet, they would begin to put it together, and I'd say, take out the barrel. What's the barrel? It's that little thing with the round thing, and they'll take that out. Good. Take out the lower part, and very carefully put it together. And they'd use a little grease, and they'd have their instruments together. And all the other kids playing other instruments would sit there and think, what are they doing? When was the last time somebody looked at you with that kind of excitement? What are you doing? What makes you so unbelievably important? See, because it takes two to have that happen. It takes the person to show interest in the other person, and the other person is doing something with their lives that's interesting, not repeating themselves over and over again. And then they would take out that instrument, and I'd say, now we're going to take out the reed. And this is where I would go into my French accent. And I'd say it like this. I'd say, first you take this slimy reed. The slimy reed. And that's the thing you put on your mouthpiece. And you put the slimy reed in your mouth, and you get it all gooey and yucky. And the kids would get their reed all gooey and yucky. And so then you put the reed on the mouthpiece. Can you say mouthpiece? Say it. Say it again. Like that, and the kids would put the reed there. I said, now you take the ligature. Oh, the ligature. You slip the ligature over the reed, and you tighten it up. And the kids would look at this reed, they look at me, are you crazy? But you know what they wanted to do, don't you? They wanted to hold it and make a sound. And the first sound out of that instrument, if you could have a camera and take a picture of those faces, and they'd make that sound, and pretty soon they'd go, oh, I made that sound. How many of you have that level of excitement about your life every day when you get up? Because if you don't go and stand in front of the mirror and go, mouthpiece, say something loving to yourself. Say something tender to yourself. See, that's what the healing begins. When you finally start loving yourself. That's when you get healed. When I would go to camp, and the kids would have that experience in these workshops, and I know some of you here have had those experiences, and you'd watch other kids literally break down. And just give it up. And finally, they could feel this generation of love inside of them that was undescribable, masterful. And you'd think that's what God created us for, to experience that every day of our lives. Why aren't we doing that? It took me 5 years when I first started coming to this type of religion. Because every time I came, I felt better about myself. I always felt much easier to live my life. I'd go to class and I'd figure out how to live my life, and then I'd drop out for a month or 2 or 3 months, and then my life would just start to sink. Why? Because this is camp. This is where we tell you the truth every week about yourself. You are God's love, and you're waiting no longer, because now you love yourself more than you've ever loved yourself before. Thank you.